if my mother is watching on a live stream, I promise I did have a tie on until a couple of minutes ago. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of ICSU, the International Council for Science, to this Science Advice to Governments meeting. My name is Stephen Wilson. I'm the Executive Director at ICSU, the International Council for Science, and we are the international sponsor of this meeting. As I think you've already heard, this meeting is being held adjacent with a number of others, including the ICSU General Assembly and a major science meeting of one of our bodies, the Science Committee on Antarctic Research. So I thought this would be an opportunity, together with welcoming you, to give you a little introduction to what the International Council for Science does. So, let me start off with the ICSU mission. So our mission, put simply, is about strengthening international science for the benefit of society. And for our board and for our members, all of those words mean something. Scientific quality is important to us. The fact that what we do and our programs lead to societal benefits is also very important. And thirdly, we act where there is a need for international collaboration, where activities can be dealt with at a purely national level. That's not for ICSU, but where there is a strong drive and a need for international partnership, that's very much where ICSU focuses. We're a membership body. We've existed for some time. I think we were founded in 1931. Some of our member bodies go back well before that. Our members come into two distinct groups. Our national members, of which there are now, I think, 121, representing 141 countries and regions, are largely national science academies. So, for example, here in New Zealand, our member is the Royal Society of New Zealand, and we're very grateful to the Royal Society for the way that it's hosted us and hosted the General Assembly that will be taking place in a few days' time. Together with our national members, we have today 31 international scientific unions. These are bodies covering disciplinary areas of science, like the International Union of Biological Sciences, the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry, and so on. And together with other organizations that affiliate with ICSU, this brings together the ICSU membership. Our organization is led by a president and an executive board. They get elected at our General Assembly meetings, which happen every 3 years. I'm very pleased that our president-elect, Professor Gordon McBain, who's just raising his hands, is here with us today. Gordon will be taking over from Professor Yuan-Se Lee as our president in a few days' time. And it's this global presence, together with our regional offices in Asia Pacific, in Latin America, which have I left out? In Africa, which really, through a global and regional presence, provide the legitimacy for ICSU to act. So let me say a little bit about our programs. So we have a strategic plan. It has 3 main priority areas. They're not particularly new. They've been around with ICSU for a little while, but I'll try to give you an indication on where the novelty is coming in at the moment. So those 3 themes are about supporting international collaborative research programs, working at the interface between science and policy, and clearly this meeting is a particularly important example of that. And a third area, which sometimes I still trip over the name a little bit, the idea of universality of science, protecting the freedoms, but also understanding the responsibilities of the scientific community, is a third and very important theme for ICSU. As I said, those 3 themes have been with us for some time, but if I were to sum up the direction of travel for ICSU at the moment in one word, I would say that I would use the term integration. So what do I mean by integration? I mean, first of all, particularly where we're working on scientific programs for societal benefit, we try to ensure that all the scientific disciplines that are needed to tackle a particular scientific challenge are brought to bear in these programs, be they from the natural sciences community, from the social sciences community, today more and more with engineers and health specialists. That disciplinary integration is important to us. Secondly, we work through our national and regional networks really to make sure that scientists throughout the world, from the least developed countries, from developing countries, from the developed world, are able to help set the ICSU agenda as well as take part in the programs themselves. And thirdly, we're thinking very much about the ideas of co-design. If our programs are operating in areas of societal benefit, how do we make sure that our stakeholders are involved in setting the priorities in the first place and getting involved in the research process? Because we think that's tremendously important if there's to be take-up of our community's work. So just to look at those three themes in very briefly, but in a little bit more detail. The first one, if you remember, was about international collaborative research, organizing excellent interdisciplinary research in particular priority areas. There's quite a heritage to this, and I'm not going to go back to the beginning, but let me just show you how our priorities have evolved over time. I think for those in the room that have worked in the geosciences community, many of you will be aware of the International Geophysical Year, 1957-1958. We're going back quite a long way here, but this is an absolutely fundamental period in the geosciences. This is the period that Sputnik got launched, but also we had the start of the first routine observations of ozone and carbon dioxide, upon which the atmospheric sciences and climate communities are so dependent on today. The International Geophysical Year followed on from, I think, at least two previous international polar years, going back, in fact, to the late 1800s. And again, IGY also had a big focus on polar issues, particularly in the Antarctic. And out of it, recognizing the benefits on collaboration on Antarctic research and the relationship with the Antarctic Treaty, the ICSU body, the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research, was born. And many of you will know, and I think some of you have already been to talks, that SCAR is holding its open science meeting here in Auckland at the moment. And then more recently, if we zoom forward again to 2007-2008, some of you will be aware of the International Polar Year. This is the next major program that's in this area that ICSU sponsored together with the World Meteorological Organization and the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, levered something like $5 billion of research in polar sciences. So that gives you a first little flavor. A second area has been particularly on global environmental change. Here, since the early 80s, through programs like the World Climate Research Program and the International Human Dimensions Program, with our partners, with the World Meteorological Organization, with the International Social Science Council, with UNESCO, we have sponsored major international endeavors which have delivered research in the area of global environmental change, which would just have been impossible on a purely national basis. And the magic in these programs has been the way that they have convened large networks of scientists, tens of thousands of scientists worldwide, to come together under the auspices of ICSU and our partners to develop shared research agendas and see those priorities driven forward in a really startling way. If we zoom forward again to today, our programs, again with our partners, are focusing in three main areas. IRDR is a program on integrated research for disaster risk. It's sponsored together with the UN ISDR and the International Social Science Council, really looking at a proper interdisciplinary approach to disaster risk reduction. Urban health program is a new area for us. Very pleasing to see colleagues from UNU, Tony Capon here in the audience, co-sponsored with the United Nations University and the Inter-Academy Medical Panel, the opportunity for ICSU to spread its wings beyond the environment domain, particularly into areas of urban health. And then a big push with our partners in the Science and Technology Alliance for Global Sustainability on sustainability issues. Many of you will have heard of the program called Future Earth. It's bringing together a number of our existing global change activities, but really with very strong push on those integration points that I was talking about earlier. So that's something about where we're at on collaborative research. Let me say a couple of words about our science and policy work. Well, ICSU works in this area in a number of different ways. Sometimes we have quite formal roles. So, for example, going back to the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992, and then since then, ICSU has been a representative, or the representative of the science community in the UN process, where we have a formal role to bring in the non-governmental perspective into those negotiations. And that continued most recently with the Rio Plus 20 meeting, and then now onto the development of the Sustainable Development Goals. ICSU was also very much instrumental with the International Social Science Council in arguing for the creation of the UN Science Advisory Board on sustainable development. And I know Professor Jörg Hacker is here, who is a member, and we continue to support that group. Moving away from that formal UN-type role, we've then played an important part in major assessment processes, both in the creation of things like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, but also through our programs, especially the World Climate Research Program and the International Geosphere Biosphere Program, in contributing knowledge to those initiatives. Most recently, we've seen the launch of IPBES. It's a pleasure to have Professor Zachary here with us, who chairs IPBES. Two of ICSU's programs play and continue to play a major role in the establishment of that assessment. The third example I'm giving there is the World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, which will take place in Sendai next year. It's a follow-up to the Hyogo Framework for Action, really to agree the next steps for governments on disaster risk reduction. Again, ICSU here is the representative of the non-governmental scientific community, but we are also beginning to see governments saying, yes, we need an assessment process, something that looks across the research portfolio in disaster risk reduction as well. And then thirdly, on the less formal side, well, of course, we have this meeting here, this meeting here today and tomorrow. But another example is our Road to Paris blog. This is really recognizing that 2015 sees the convergence of major policy processes in the environment domain, disaster risk reduction, the UNFCCC, and IPBES is moving forward as well. And through that blog and the very engaging articles that are produced, we are trying to reach out beyond the communities that we're normally engaging to get more people involved and actively involved in those debates. So finally, just a word about universality. This is all about protecting freedoms and also understanding the responsibilities of the scientific community. If we look back over time, it's dealt with things like moving data across the Iron Curtain in the 50s and 60s. Today, on the freedom side, our Committee on Freedoms and Responsibilities in Science is very active when it sees scientists, unfortunately, imprisoned in certain countries around the world. But equally, there's the responsibilities side. So questions of scientific integrity, issues relating to open data and data access are coming to the fore. Most recently in this area, our bodies have had quite a concern about difficulties that scientists from around the world are having in being able to attend scientific conferences because of difficulties in getting hold of travel visas. And I'm sure that many of you will be familiar with that concern, and ICSU has been trying to make high-level representations on that issue. So finally, ICSU-sponsored endeavours, very much including this one, and I've just put just a few images of a few people that are associated with this meeting on this slide, can only be successful because of all of you. So we offer a great debt of gratitude to you. The time that you contribute to ICSU programs and ICSU initiatives, and this particular program, really, it's absolutely wonderful and deeply appreciated by our full executive board. Just as I finish here, I wanted to particularly say a thank you to the full organising committee for this meeting. A special thank you to James for all the work that has gone into producing the input report for this meeting with teams from New Zealand and from ICSU. Colleagues, if you haven't seen it yet, it's outside. Please do take a look. And also a thank you to all of the ICSU national members and other bodies that contributed to this report. Please also take the opportunity to have a look at the articles that are appearing on the London Guardian website in the science policy section. This is quite a lot going on there. And finally, a really big thank you to Professor Sir Peter Gluckman, without whom this meeting would have just been impossible. Peter, you've put enormous energies and efforts into putting this meeting together, and all of us at ICSU are deeply appreciative. Colleagues, hopefully that's given you a little introduction to ICSU. If you want to find out more, please come and talk to me or Gordon and our other members of the ICSU team, and of course you have the ICSU website as well. Thank you.